Today on Notsam Wrestling, the masked man has officially been unmasked. We have our Elimination Chamber winners, but we still don't really have a WWE Championship match at WrestleMania. The box has been opened. Danhausen is here. Enjoy the show or be cursed. This is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling, coming off of Elimination Chamber, heading towards WrestleMania. Two emergency podcasts this week. We did an emergency podcast, I combined it, right? We did a preview podcast for Elimination Chamber, but I had decided earlier in the day I didn't do one. And then after SmackDown, I decided to pull the trigger and go okay, we can do an emergency preview for Elimination Chamber because everything changed to me after SmackDown. And then, of course, the emergency podcast following the Elimination Chamber. So if you didn't listen to either one of those, definitely do, especially the post-Elimination Chamber show, because I really spent the time getting into my feelings on Randy Orton winning the Chamber and what the WWE title picture is going to look like. And now that I've slept on it, we'll talk about it more today. But what we didn't talk about, what we maybe just mentioned, was the fact that the crate was opened. I was all on board with this crate. I was talking about it. We were wildly speculating. I was excited about it. The crate shows up. We had 3 matches into a 4-match show. CM Punk retains the World Heavyweight title, and then this crate shows up. And this crate is in the middle of the United Center, and we have Nick Aldis and Adam Pearce, both with crowbars, opening this thing. The front falls down. And I had been told there was no way that a human being could survive in a crate for 2 weeks. Little did I know, and little did the haters know, that there were about 15 humans surviving in that crate for 2 weeks, because it was filled with Danhausen and the Danhausettes, as I've named them. Danhausen appears from the crate, and people don't quite know what to make of it. And I don't think that that's the most shocking response to Danhausen, especially if this is your first exposure to it. I was thrilled with the Danhausen reveal, and you may take that as an opportunity to say that Sam is a shill, and you can say that all you want. However, I'm on record as a Danhausen fan. I'm on record as a Danhausen supporter. Danhausen has been on this podcast multiple times. Danhausen has sat in this basement, full regalia, full everything. Not somebody who, quote unquote, plays Danhausen. Danhausen has sat here with me over an hour and broken everything down. If there is any question as to who this Danhausen is, go back into the archives of Notsam Wrestling. You could just YouTube it. Sam Roberts Danhausen. You'll see him sitting right here in this studio with me, breaking down who he is and what motivates him. And that's monies. Monies motivate this Danhausen, who, while very nice, is also very evil. I can understand the confusion that Danhausen has created. First of all, I think that the box started creating the confusion because, of course, Danhausen comes out. And when the girls come out and the Danhausen song plays, which, by the way, the Danhausen song is money. Danhausen, this is what we've been asking for wrestling characters. Danhausen having his own song that he's performing the lyrics of that have to do with Danhausen. You know exactly who's coming out and what's it about. This is what we've wanted in the presentation of our superstars. So Danhausen comes out, has his own music, has his own presentation, has all the dancing Danhausen girls all around him, full with the cape on and everything. Hands Michael Cole a jar of Danhausen teeth. Points, a tiny explosion goes off. Although if you ask Danhausen, I'm sure it was a massive display of pyrotechnics. And then Danhausen and the girls, they all disappear. We continue on with the show. When Danhausen first came out, there was a little pop for him, a little reaction, like, oh, this is fun, there he is. By the time it ended, they were booing him in Chicago. And I think that I think that there's a couple things going on there. I think that maybe people are not familiar with Danhausen, or maybe they've forgotten. Danhausen was an absolute phenomenon on the independents within the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. He was a phenomenon on the indies, and the previous incarnation of Ring of Honor. And he developed this amazing name for himself where fans all over the place knew who he was, even though he had no real television exposure. And he would make money hand over fist selling merchandise, and the content that he created online was good, and he would do good numbers for podcasts, and the whole world knew that he became a star. He became a star on the independents in wrestling, and then he went over to AEW. And at first, it was a thing, but then he kind of disappeared from television for a long time. You know, he hasn't done anything of note in AEW in like, you know, at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And now that he's freed up, he's in the WWE, and I think that's part of it, right? I think that number one, there are WWE fans. There's a lot of WWE fans that only watch WWE. If you look at the numbers, the eyeballs that WWE brings in, it's more eyeballs than any other promotion, which would lead you to believe that there are sets of eyeballs that's all the wrestling that they're watching. So they don't know Danhausen to begin with. Even the people that do watch other shows, they may not have been watching in 2021. They may not have been, you know, when Danhausen was everywhere. That was years ago at this point. So I think in hindsight, yeah, could you have done some vignettes? Could you have done, sure, whatever. I think that it's also a heavy concentration on the debut as opposed to the impact that he could have in the WWE. But I think there's a couple of things, right? So I think that, I mean, look, he clearly does appeal to a certain fan base. I like camp. I like horror. I like silliness. I like Simpsons references. I'm going to like Danhausen. But he also is entertaining on a level that even if you don't get him at first, and maybe you'll never fully be able to explain who or what Danhausen is, I promise you're going to be entertained by him. There's no doubt in my mind that you're going to be entertained by him. And I feel like if the crate just appeared and he popped out of the crate without any expectations, I don't think anybody would have said 2 words about it. They would have just said, oh my God, that was nuts. Danhausen is here and look how fun that was. But I think a couple of things, right? With the magical power of hindsight that we have, which I think people also have to take that into consideration. Everybody's an expert with hindsight, including myself. I think that the box itself has to be addressed. Because I think that the thought of the box was that it would be ridiculous in 2026 for a wrestler to debut out of a box. This is a wrestling trope. This is a wrestling trope where there's a trope of the trope. You know, it's a meme. Jim Cornette at one point saying anybody, you know, being attributed with the quote, anybody who debuts out of a box or whatever he said is automatically over. Like it's an old school wrestling trope that is known to be ridiculous. And in hindsight, I think the idea of a wrestler debuting out of a box in 2026 was meant to be absurd. And therefore, you could only imagine that the result of the box debut would be absurd. However, I think that was a miscalculation because it's true. We're wrestling fans. We love mystery boxes. Honestly, everybody loves mystery boxes. Anybody with kids will tell you, when we were growing up, you go to the store, you buy action figures. The action figures come in boxes. You can see right through it. So you know the exact action figure that you're going to buy. Now, no. No kid wants action figures that you could see what it is. They want the mystery box. And what's a mystery box? A mystery box is something that you go, oh, wow, look what I got. And then 3 days later, you throw the whole thing in the garbage. And then you spend another $15 on a new mystery box that's just full of tchotchkes. Everybody loves mystery boxes. Kids love mystery boxes. Everything's a mystery box now. So I think that culturally, boxes are very much in style. And who knows what you could find inside a mystery box. And in wrestling, we have low-key always loved mystery boxes. And so as wrestling fans, our imaginations went wild. I mean, I was talking to people who were like, you know, obviously we talked about it being Jericho. So for me, like, I think 2 weeks ago, whenever the box debuted, the first thing I thought was that's Jericho. And the reason that I thought it was Jericho was because the absurdity of the premise led me to thinking this is a guy who kind of understands this old school wackiness of pro wrestling. And Chris Jericho has always been good about understanding professional wrestling and professional wrestling audiences. But as the weeks, the 2 weeks went on, as the shows went on, and you saw like the general managers of the two shows going like, I don't know, just get the box out of here. Like disregarding the box like it was not important. Adam Pearce saying, yeah, I guess they misspell my name on this one, whatever. Johnny Gargano getting depressed and planking on top of the box. As it went on, I said, I think that the box is maybe going to be a little bit more silly and a little bit less, oh my God, we're going to change the world with this box. However, there were a lot of people that didn't feel that way. I heard, even up until the last day, I heard Jericho. I heard people thinking The Rock was going to be in the box. Some people were hoping Vince McMahon was going to be in the box. It was crazy what I was hearing about this box, and I had to be like, guys, the main event of WrestleMania is not going to be restructured by what's in this box. It's a box. Okay? Like we're already telling the stories of the main events of WrestleMania. This is just a box. This is fun. We're going to have some fun. But I think expectations change. And while you could say that, well, WWE didn't create those expectations, and they didn't. They didn't make anybody think this was going to be bigger than it was. I do think that once you become aware of expectations, it doesn't really matter where they came from. Expectations are going to be expectations. So there's the box itself, which I think does actually, when you really like, when you get out of whatever mental space you put yourself in, thinking the box was going to be something, and then you go, oh, okay, it actually makes perfect sense that something as silly as a box like Danhausen would think that this was a spectacular entrance, when in reality it was not as spectacular as Danhausen thought. That's why the explosions that Danhausen put out there were just these little sparks. Because Danhausen is a character who is full of hubris and takes himself very, very seriously and believes that he is cursing people and believes that he is casting these spells. And the idea is that everybody around him lives in reality where they know he is absurd. He is ridiculous. However, every now and then, some of these curses and some of these things that Danhausen does, they come to fruition. And that's the fun, that's the magic of Danhausen, and you just get into it. I think between all of that, right? The box, the expectations, and the idea of a lot of people maybe not knowing who Danhausen was. And maybe you could have done it a different way. Maybe you could have created vignettes. Maybe you could have done this. Maybe you could have done that. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and Monday morning quarterback this whole thing. But people were like, what was that? And it wasn't the way Michael Cole, like, we don't have any context for why Danhausen gave Michael Cole a jar full of teeth. But anybody that knows Danhausen knows that's exactly what Danhausen would have done. And realistically, it should be something that, again, like, when you look at what Danhausen got original music that is relevant to his character, fun and catchy. Danhausen got to keep his name. Danhausen got to keep his gimmick. And Danhausen is doing all the Danhausen things that he's been doing across every organization that he's ever been to. All the things that people worry about when their favorite wrestler goes to WWE and everything about them gets changed and we go, what happened here? None of it happened to Danhausen. He gets to just be Danhausen, and we love that Danhausen, don't we? I think that what's going to be fun, for me anyway, is the journey that we're going to go on. And I kind of think that if you're going to spin things into a positive, and you should always try to spin anything into a positive, what's clear is that the WWE audience does not have a ton of expectations for Danhausen. They don't really know what to expect, what he's going to do, what his purpose is. And that's something you can play with. You know what I mean? That's something that now you can build. I think that the journey of Danhausen in the WWE almost starts fresh. And you get this ability to, and the way I would do it is I would make this debut where instead of it being this over-the-top, spectacular, raining praise on you debut, You have an arena full of people going, what is going on? And everybody on the internet trying to make heads or tails of it. I think you use that. It all becomes the foundation of who Danhausen in the WWE is. And I think that, Danhausen, this should all be Danhausen lore at this point. Danhausen should be sitting there and thinking that his debut was absolutely spectacular, magnificent, the greatest debut of all time. And then we allow Danhausen to just go on this journey. And Michael Cole and Wade Barrett, whoever the broadcast team is, they're under no obligation to play Danhausen's game. And fans are under no obligation to play into Danhausen's game. That's the other fun of Danhausen, is that it's on him to convince you to enter Danhausen world. But every time I've seen this guy be put in that position, he succeeds. And you could sit there and you could go, wow, how are we going to take this seriously? We got serious rivalries going on. CM Punk and Roman Reigns, it's very, very personal. See, Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton, they all want to tear each other apart. You got Jacob Fatu coming from a place of reality. You got all this serious stuff. How is anybody going to take Danhausen seriously? But the reality is that Ring of Honor, the former iteration of it, was literally known as a no-nonsense wrestling organization. It was just about the action in the ring. And Danhausen was able to be successful in Ring of Honor. I'm very hopeful that we see him on Raw this week. I think that music should play and the Danhausen girls should show up. I hope that they stay and that this whole production is made out of him and that it becomes this sort of like interruption in the show that you're like, what on earth is going on? Because as a Danhausen fan, I watched that and I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. And then the more I sat with the reaction to it, and either like after that initial pop, either the quiet that was around it or the boos that came after the lights went out, I was like, that's so Danhausen. That's a very Danhausen thing to have organically and naturally happened. And now old Danhausen has to dig himself out of this hole. I'm looking forward to what Danhausen is. The Danhausen character should be fighting against an audience that at first doesn't understand him. Because he's literally a person who thinks he's a 1950s horror movie villain. And his opponents don't. His opponents live in the same world that we live in. So it becomes up to him to bring us into that space. And I think that that's what we're going to see with Danhausen. People are making comparisons to maybe it'll be more of an entertainment-based thing like an R-Truth. I think you could put, honestly, I wouldn't even look at R-Truth because I think R-Truth is beloved, and I think Danhausen is going to be beloved. Danhausen, I don't think he's going to get booed for long. I think Danhausen is going to be beloved. I think people are going to figure it out. There's nothing that I could tell you about Danhausen. That's the thing. Like, a lot of people talk about vignettes. And that is true. I only think that vignettes might have helped because it would have told you that Danhausen is coming. And then it would have subverted expectations, right? It would have made it so that we were expecting, even if you didn't know what it was or who it was, it's what you were expecting. I think that could have changed things a little bit. But I think that Danhausen is going to be beloved in the WWE. I do. I think that you're going to see the way he interacts with different characters. I think that he's going to end up getting cheered. And I think that probably one of the early things that I would do is have him pop up over on SmackDown and just have Kit Wilson interrupt him. I mean, Kit Wilson saying that he's toxic, Danhausen cursing Kit Wilson, and then Kit Wilson starts either losing or getting beaten up, and he blames it on the Danhausen curse. I mean, that's the thing, right? That's the beauty of it. That Danhausen is this bizarre, weirdo character. I mean, people didn't know what to make of Goldust at first. What a weird thing. This dude rubbing his body all over the place. Talking about, quotes from Hollywood movies and stuff, and he shows up and he looks like a human Oscar statue. But he was great in '96. Goldust, this gimmick was incredible. You know, I think that this especially because Danhausen like lives this Danhausen gimmick. And the idea of him cursing somebody like Kit Wilson and then things happening and making Kit Wilson feel like he's actually being cursed is amazing. What if one day there's a face-to-face between Danhausen and Aleister Black? Because Aleister Black is this like real dark, brooding, kind of reality-based, dark energy guy. And Danhausen thinks that he is. Like, Danhausen thinks that he's Aleister Black, but he's the completely absurd photo-negative version of that. And Aleister Black just kicks him out of the ring or something like that. You know, that's what you can get with Danhausen. That's what he's here to do. And Danhausen can wrestle, and Danhausen can do all this. Is Danhausen, again, is he going to be the WWE champion? Not immediately. Was he brought in to jump into the Elimination Chamber match and win to go to WrestleMania and main event? No. He was brought in because wrestling is a buffet. It's a variety show. And like, look at this insane, wild thing that's going on over here in this corner. I think it's great. I'm very much looking forward to Danhausen's presence in the WWE and the evolution of that presence. And I'm very much looking forward to a new audience kind of coming around on the fact that like Danhausen absolutely rules. I can't wait to see it. We're going to get right back to it, but today's episode of Notsam Wrestling is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more, they're all saying it. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it. So your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. There was, in the Elimination Chamber match, a significantly big reveal that does have impact on the main event scene right now in WWE. And that, of course, was the official reveal of the masked man. Not the maybe masked man, not the I don't know who that guy is masked man, but the actual masked man who's been hunting down the Vision. So, on SmackDown, the show starts with absolute chaos. Jey Uso gets taken out in an ambulance. Logan Paul and Jacob Fatu both want the spot in the Elimination Chamber. Sami Zayn thinks that that's suspicious, but Sami Zayn's on some other stuff right now. And we get the match. Logan Paul versus Jacob Fatu. A masked man shows up, takes out Austin Theory, but then Logan Paul knocks him out, rips the mask off, and it's just some dude. Oh, that's that dude. While all that's going on, a distraction is caused, and Drew McIntyre hits Jacob Fatu with the title and costs Jacob Fatu another qualifying match, which puts Logan Paul inside the Elimination Chamber. I thought that it was possible that Drew McIntyre, because I didn't know where they were going with this masked man thing after what had happened to Bronson Reed. You know, Braun Breaker went down with an injury a couple weeks ago. Then in the Elimination Chamber qualifying match, Bronson Reed apparently tears his bicep. Jey Uso wins the thing. And now Bronson Reed is out of action. So when you have no Braun Breaker and you have no Bronson Reed, all three original members of the Vision in this one moment are on the shelf, which means if Seth Rollins comes back first, you've kind of wiped out all members of the Vision that were still there when Seth Rollins got betrayed. Logan Paul didn't come in until after Seth Rollins left. So I'm going, I wonder if they're just going to scrap the masked man. I wonder if they're going to be like, oh yeah, I don't know, it was that dude, but whatever. Or if that masked man was going to end up being somebody that Drew McIntyre sent out to cause the distraction so he could hit Jacob Fatu with the belt. But it was none of those things. It was the continuation of the masked man story. So Logan Paul is in the match. And now Logan Paul eliminates Javon Evans. Logan Paul eliminates LA Knight after LA Knight has a really unfortunate miss of that pop to the top rope elbow drop. LA Knight, yeah, pops up to the top rope. Unfortunately, slipped off that top rope. Not the greatest moment for LA Knight in a pretty big spot. Ends up getting low blowed by Logan Paul, which is legal in a chamber match, and then rolled up 1, 2, 3. LA Knight's eliminated. Now, when Javon Evans got eliminated, I was bummed because I was like, well, it's a little early, and it's quick in the match. He was the first one eliminated before we really saw any super bouncy stuff. A little bit of bouncy stuff, but not a ton of bouncy stuff, which I would have loved more bouncy. Then LA Knight gets eliminated, but he gets eliminated right after he drops Trick Williams with a BFT. And so I was already bummed out that Trick Williams got dropped with a BFT because I love Trick Williams, but also just seeing LA Knight get rolled up and listening to the ovation that he got in Chicago, I was like, well, that's a bummer. And then when Trick Williams gets back in the ring, he gets that crossroads hit on him. Logan Paul shoves Cody Rhodes out of the way, goes for the cover, 1, 2, 3, eliminates Trick Williams, which again, Trick Williams is a guy, got a great reaction in Chicago, but also somebody that we were talking about and somebody that I was like, man, I would love it to see seeing Trick Williams, I don't know if win this thing, but come close. I would have loved to see Trick Williams win the thing, but at least come close. And unfortunately, he didn't get to or have any like super massive moments other than the fact that he has all this support. And also seeing Logan Paul beat 3 guys. There was a wonderful spot in the beginning when Logan Paul first came in of Trick and Cody and Javon all beating up Logan Paul. That was a lot of fun. I think Logan Paul is one of those heels with real heat, that when he's eliminating fan favorites, he's going to get that heat. And I think that was intentional. I think that you want to have Logan Paul eliminating people that's going to bum people out. And I also think that the idea was to make Logan Paul look as strong as possible going into WrestleMania. I think that there's a likelihood that same exact spot was originally made for Braun Breaker, then it was made for Bronson Reed, and then it was made for Logan Paul. Right, but it would have been acted out very differently. Braun Breaker would have been able to come in and power through people. Bronson Reed would have been able to come in and squash people. But once we get those guys out of there and Logan Paul's now in the spot, it's almost like, okay, we need to play the story out this way. Because I think the idea is to build a WrestleMania opponent for Seth Rollins. I didn't necessarily feel like the reveal of the Masked Man was rushed because it felt like you could have done a version of that with first Braun Breaker and then Bronson Reed and still gotten to the Seth. I think that was probably always the moment that Seth Rollins was going to unmask, but I don't know for sure. It's just a guess watching the way I watched. And then we do get a masked man show up. He gets taken out. It's another rando, just a dude, and he's smiling this time. And I actually kind of really enjoyed that because it almost became like, now this masked man is a different entity where he's got all these. It's like like Bane or Joker in The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises, having these soldiers that will just go out and sacrifice everything for him, and they don't care about what happens to him. As the dude's getting dragged off, and he's just smiling because his leader told him to do something. I thought that was a fun visual. But as all this is happening, another masked man sneaks into the cage, hits Logan Paul with a super kick to the chest and then a stomp. Cody Rhodes gets the pin on Logan Paul. The masked man unmasks. And it is indeed Seth Rollins. I love that it was, and this was my pick for the masked man. I think it was the best option for the masked man. I think the idea of setting Seth Rollins up as a potential red herring only for him to be the actual reveal was always the right way to go. I said, and I think the person that really sold it was Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman shrieking, absolutely shrieking on the outside of the ring, I thought was money, and I thought it really elevated what a big deal this was. Because I think it is unfortunate that, this is, fans know that division members keep getting injured. So this is this thing of, that's the background of all of this that's happening. And I think that Paul Heyman reacting the way that he reacted elevated this whole thing so that it was still that, oh my God, Seth is back and we're all in so much trouble. Because you could have painted this picture of we're already in so much trouble because we lost Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed, but you didn't. And I think that was intentional because the problem can't be we got a little bad luck with injuries. The problem has to be Seth Rollins. And if you're going to WrestleMania with that problem, then you have to keep this idea alive that we'll be fine unless that guy returns to the WWE. And that's exactly what happened in the chamber. We also got a wonderful moment of Rollins and Rhodes kind of staring at each other, that Rollins had helped Cody Rhodes, although he didn't want to. But again, he helped him at WrestleMania 40. And he did it not because he loved Cody, but because he didn't want Roman to be the champion. Once again, Cody's in a position where he's able to pin Logan Paul because Seth Rollins helped him. And Seth Rollins didn't help him because he wants to help Cody. Seth Rollins helped him because he doesn't want Logan Paul to win this match, because he wants to take everything away from the Vision. And I like that a lot. And we'll talk about how the match went on after that. I'm very much looking forward to Seth talking about this and playing this story out more on television now that we know that he's back. I think that what you're looking at, as we're now forming WrestleMania matches with whatever it is, 6-7 weeks to go before WrestleMania, I think that Seth versus Logan Paul looks like the match, which I believe is the WrestleMania 39 match, I want to say as well. But now this is a completely different story. It's a completely different Logan Paul. It's a completely different Seth Rollins. But there's also this part of me that I feel like there is another direction to go. You don't have to do Seth Rollins versus Logan Paul. But Seth jumped in the cage. Seth knocked Logan Paul out of the match. Wouldn't Seth's problem be with Logan Paul? No. Seth's problem, one would think, is with Paul Heyman. Logan Paul didn't turn on Seth Rollins. Austin Theory didn't turn on Seth Rollins, although Logan Paul and Austin Theory both have their histories with Seth Rollins. In this instance, Logan Paul and Austin Theory had very little to do with the Vision, nothing to do with the Vision, when Seth Rollins was turned on. Paul Heyman had a lot to do with it. Paul Heyman was the guy who, maybe he wasn't the mastermind behind it, but he accepted it and he moved it forward. Paul Heyman is the guy that Seth has a problem with. Paul Heyman is the guy who a couple of months ago was confronted by Becky Lynch after Seth Rollins went down. And Becky Lynch said, when Seth gets back, he's coming for you, and he's not going to put his hands on you. He's going to destroy everything you hold dear. He's going to destroy everybody that you love. He's going to leave you with nothing in this business. And then what will you be? And from that point on, that's where I had this vision of like Seth Rollins as a John Wick, just this solo soldier going to destroy everybody that's around Paul Heyman. Just because Paul Heyman messed with the wrong guy. Now, maybe he continues on having all these anonymous, Seth Rollins guys running around, or it really is just Seth Rollins. But I feel like Seth has the opportunity to do something besides Logan Paul. Seth has the opportunity to truly disrupt, not the Vision's WrestleMania plans, because those have already been disrupted. Seth has the opportunity to disrupt Paul Heyman's WrestleMania plans. As much as I think we will probably see Logan Paul versus Seth Rollins, and as much as I think that can be a very compelling story, and as much as I think that would be really good, not just for Seth coming back, but the idea of Logan Paul being a centerpiece heel in a rivalry like this, I think would be really, really good for Logan Paul. I think that we do forget how mainstream famous Logan Paul is. I think that we do forget the level of commitment that he clearly has for WWE. And I think Logan Paul should be in massive, massive singles matches. Logan Paul is the guy who boxed Floyd Mayweather and sold all those pay-per-views, sold all those tickets for it. That's what Logan Paul does. And so the idea of him having a massive singles match, now that he's a full-time WWE guy, he should be a top guy. But all that said, I'm more focused on Seth, which is why Seth versus Logan is an appealing match to me, and I don't want you to get me wrong. I just want to talk about this other idea that I had as I was thinking about it, as I was thinking about the logic of Seth Rollins. Now, if we get Logan Paul out of the equation altogether, and I'm thinking about the logic of Seth Rollins and his motivation and who he is and why he's doing what he's doing, I look at Seth and I go, would Seth go after Logan Paul? Because Paul Heyman did something on Monday Night Raw last week that was totally separate from Vision business. He brought out Brock Lesnar, and he sang the praises of the Brock Lesnar match. And he said that historically there have been 2 WrestleMania main events, the world title match and the Undertaker match, except at WrestleMania 30, Brock Lesnar ended the streak. So now there's a world title match and there's a Brock Lesnar match. It's difficult for me to believe that while Seth is on this quest to destroy the Vision because of Paul Heyman's connection to them, that he wouldn't look at Paul Heyman's other business ventures, that he wouldn't look at a Brock Lesnar and go, what if I answered that open challenge? Because when you want to talk about history, historically, what happened after Brock Lesnar beat Roman Reigns? Beat Undertaker. After WrestleMania 30, Brock Lesnar beat The Undertaker, and the Brock Lesnar match became a thing. Except 1 year later, Brock Lesnar did not win his match at WrestleMania 31. That was interrupted. Seth Rollins took that victory from Brock Lesnar. He didn't pin Brock Lesnar on that night, but he did take that victory. At WrestleMania 35, 5 years after Brock Lesnar had beat the streak, Seth and Brock met again at WrestleMania, and Seth Rollins beat Brock Lesnar in the opening match of WrestleMania 35. If Paul Heyman is now setting up this idea of the Brock Lesnar match and putting Brock Lesnar on this throne, who better than Seth Rollins to answer that challenge? If his problem is not just with the Vision and the people who associated with the people who turned on Seth Rollins, and it's a complicated story to tell because I'm sure the intention would have been Braun Breaker or even Bronson Reed. But they're not around right now. Is there a world where Seth Rollins goes after Brock Lesnar? I think that would be very compelling. And a part of me will go, okay, well, what are you going to do with the Vision? Would it make sense for the Vision to have other business? They weren't around when what happened to Seth Rollins happened to Seth Rollins. Is Seth Rollins doing this to stop Logan Paul and Austin Theory, or is he doing this to stop Paul Heyman? If he's doing it to stop Paul Heyman, then he would want to go after the head of that snake, which is Brock Lesnar. I wouldn't mind seeing Logan Paul and Austin Theory team up. I think Logan Paul and Austin Theory versus the Usos could be a great WrestleMania match. I think putting the tag team championship on Logan Paul and Austin Theory could be great. And let's say Seth Rollins beats Brock Lesnar again. Let's say Seth Rollins goes back to WrestleMania to ruin this for Brock Lesnar and for Paul Heyman. Then he comes out of it, and maybe Logan Paul and Austin Theory are even bigger stars than they were going into WrestleMania, but now, they don't do singles matches anymore. They're the tag team champions. You can still tell that story, and who knows how long Braun Breaker or Bronson Reed are out of action. I have no clue. But as much as I think we will probably get to Seth Rollins versus Logan Paul, I think Seth Rollins versus Brock Lesnar has a lot of meat on the bone. I was speaking of WrestleMania matches, I was talking about this right after the Elimination Chamber, late night after the Elimination Chamber. Of course, after Seth Rollins interfered in that Elimination Chamber match, Drew McIntyre was able to sneak in the door. He hits Cody with the belt. He starts attacking Cody. Cody starts attacking him back. Randy Orton gets Drew McIntyre off Cody, is able to hit Drew McIntyre with the RKO. Cody then picks him up. Randy's encouraging, Cody, go for it. Cody, go for it. And just as Randy is encouraging that, Cody hits Drew McIntyre with the crossroads, and Randy Orton hits Cody Rhodes with an RKO. And you're like, oh my God. Randy Orton has won the Elimination Chamber match. So on paper, you think it's Randy Orton versus Drew McIntyre at WrestleMania. That's one that nobody saw coming. But then right after the show, Nick Aldis and Drew McIntyre are screaming at each other, and Nick Aldis is absolutely furious. He keeps telling Drew McIntyre to not get involved, and Drew McIntyre keeps getting involved. So Nick Aldis makes the announcement on the post show that we're getting Drew McIntyre versus Cody Rhodes for the WWE Championship on SmackDown. Now, there are a couple things. Of course, there have been people who are pointing out that I thought Cody Rhodes wasn't supposed to get a rematch. I thought the whole thing was that there's no rematch for Cody Rhodes. And while that is true, I don't think you would consider this a rematch. First of all, it's been 2 months since their first match, so it's not exactly a rematch. Second of all, I think this is a match not based upon, well, the champion gets a rematch. This is a match based upon, of course, if Cody Rhodes won the Royal Rumble, he would get a rematch. Except Drew McIntyre eliminated Cody Rhodes from the Royal Rumble, and he wasn't even in the match. Well, of course, if Cody Rhodes won the Elimination Chamber, he would get a match with Drew McIntyre. Except Drew McIntyre interfered in the Elimination Chamber qualifier that Cody Rhodes was still able to win. But Drew McIntyre cost Jacob Fatu 2 different Elimination Chamber qualifying matches. So now you got Jacob Fatu furious about not getting a match. And Cody is like, okay, well, fine. I'll go into the chamber. Once again, Drew McIntyre interferes in this Elimination Chamber match, causing Cody to lose, causing the distraction, getting involved physically. And now, once again, Cody loses this opportunity. Now, I think that Jacob Fatu has every reason in the world to say, okay, technically, Cody was screwed twice. He was screwed at the Rumble, and he was screwed at Elimination Chamber. Except I was also screwed twice, is what Jacob Fatu would say. Me too. I was screwed in 2 different qualifiers. We were screwed over equal amounts of time. I think that there is a very logical conclusion where you get to SmackDown and it's Drew McIntyre versus Cody Rhodes. And Jacob Fatu gets involved. And Jacob Fatu makes a compelling case for himself. And Nick Aldis has already set up, Drew, that Cody deserves a title match because he keeps getting screwed if once again there's interference. And Jacob Fatu is saying, hey, man, I got screwed just as much as Cody. Why is Cody getting a match? I think that that's how you get to a pretty clear fatal 4-way. And I think that that's potentially the match. If you're going to do if Drew McIntyre is still champion on Friday night at 11 p.m. Eastern, then I think the main event for SmackDown, for WrestleMania, is going to be Drew, Randy, Cody, and Jacob for the WWE Championship. And I think that would be a huge match, and I think there's a very clear, logical story to it. I think it gives opportunity for not only Cody to be back in that title match, it gives opportunity for Drew McIntyre to walk into WrestleMania as champion, which is big. It gives opportunity for Randy Orton to potentially be 15-time and be back in that conversation for WWE Champion. And it gives Jacob Fatu the opportunity to elevate to a WWE Championship match at WrestleMania. A lot of people win with that fatal 4-way option. But there's always a but. I can't get the thought out of my head that if Cody Rhodes were to beat Drew McIntyre on SmackDown, then you go to WrestleMania with Cody Rhodes versus Randy Orton. I think that as much sense as that fatal 4-way makes, you could similarly tell a story of Jacob Fatu, because Jacob Fatu said he didn't have a problem with Cody Rhodes. Jacob Fatu has even said that it's not necessarily about the championship. Jacob Fatu has made it pretty clear it's about Drew McIntyre. He thinks Drew kicked his teeth down his throat. It's about Drew McIntyre. So I think there is a version of this story that you tell where maybe Jacob Fatu cost Drew McIntyre the title. Maybe Jacob Fatu doesn't cause a double DQ or a schmaz or a non-finish or whatever. Maybe Jacob Fatu just causes Drew to lose the title. Because if that happens, then you've got Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes, and you've got Jacob Fatu versus Drew McIntyre at WrestleMania. And I love, first of all, I 9.5 times out of 10, I prefer a singles match to a multi-person. Generally speaking, that's going to be my preference. I think the idea of Jacob Fatu and Drew McIntyre getting a big match at WrestleMania, with Drew McIntyre going in with this chip on his shoulder that he should be champion, And Jacob Fatu going in with the chip on his shoulder, that he's elevated to the point that this is a main event match. This is a match where we are going in and we are saying, the winner of this is most likely the guy who's next in line for a WWE championship match. We're going to get there. But you've got two guys who I think are going to be hell-bent on stealing the show. I think you're going to end up with a Drew McIntyre and a Jacob Fatu that are hell-bent on being the people who fans go, maybe that should have been the title match. I think that's going to be the real-life goal if you go with Drew McIntyre versus Jacob Fatu. You've got two guys that are in reality going to be wanting fans to say, I like Randy and Cody, but maybe that should have been the title match. I think you get something legendary out of Jacob and Drew. At the same time, I think Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes is a night one main event. Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes in that ring, and it's got to be a scenario where something's got to give. It's got to be a scenario. I think that Randy versus Cody gives you the most potential to create a moment that makes people talk. The same way, remember after WrestleMania Night 1, the whole world was buzzing about Paul Heyman turning on CM Punk and Roman Reigns, about Paul Heyman leaving the side of the tribal chief and joining up with Seth Rollins. I mean, it was a perfectly executed finish of a match to create a moment where Seth Rollins is standing strong and Paul Heyman, of all people, is by his side. I think you have the opportunity of creating another night one moment if you've got Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton. I think this is one of those matches that you can tell a story leading to WrestleMania where both of them don't seem like they're completely fighting on the side of law, order, and justice. That both of them show imperfections. Both of them show elements of selfishness. And both of them kind of display what that title is doing to them. And we get there with the thinking that something's got to give. One of these guys is leaving as a heel. I think you walk in, if you are going to do Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes, you walk in with a babyface versus babyface scenario, but you kind of know. You just have that feeling. Something is going to happen in this match. And whoever walks out champion is officially corrupted by that title. I think that you walk out of WrestleMania with a heel WWE champion, and it's either Cody Rhodes or it's Randy Orton. One of them turns on the other one. And maybe the whole world thinks it's going to be Randy, but it turns out being Cody, or maybe everybody knows one of them's going to do it. I mean, there's just so much you could tell. And that way, if there is Cody fatigue when he wins the championship, that's a big if. But if there is any type of Cody fatigue when he beats Drew McIntyre for the title, it's all well and good. It becomes one of those things that was part of the story that we're telling. It becomes one of those things that is foundational to the moment that we get at the end of WrestleMania Night 1. But that, for me, what do I want? I mean, what do I think is going to happen? I think we probably get Seth and Logan Paul. I think we probably get a fatal four-way between Randy, Drew, Jacob, and Cody. These are matches that appear logical based on the stories that we're telling. But if we really want to create things that it's like, whoa, what's going on now? What's going on now? What I want? I want Seth versus Brock, Jacob versus Drew, and Cody versus Randy. That's what I would like to see at WrestleMania. We're going to get right back to it, but this time of year, I'm always trying to stay consistent with eating well, but between work and workouts, commuting, all the jobs and family, cooking, it isn't happening. Tempo gives me fresh, balanced meals ready in 2 minutes so I can eat the way I want without losing my most precious resource, time. During the week, my schedule is nonstop shows and meetings and everything. Tempo keeps me grounded with real meals that I can heat in 2 minutes so I don't default to snacks or takeout or ordering on the phone or anything. Tempo delivers fresh, chef-curated, dietitian-approved meals right to your door. Each meal perfectly portioned for lunch or dinner, and like I said, ready in only 2 minutes. That means real food, real fast, without the sad desk lunch or drive-through regret. They got 20 new recipes every week made from nutrient-rich ingredients. Tempo keeps things exciting and helps you stay consistent with healthy habits. And no matter your goals, there's a Tempo for a meal for you. Protein-packed meals up to 30 grams of protein, calorie-conscious, even GLP-1 balanced meals. It's convenient, but it's also flexible enough to fit the way you want to eat. The best part, for a limited time, Tempo is offering my listeners 60% off your first box. Just go to tempomeals.com/notsam. That's tempomeals.com/notsam for 60% off your first box. Tempomeals.com/notsam. Rules and restrictions may apply. I'll tell you, before Elimination Chamber, I told you something that I had decided that I wanted to see was Rhea Ripley versus Jade Cargill. And I still want to see Rhea Ripley versus Jade Cargill. And I'm very excited that we are going to see Rhea Ripley versus Jade Cargill. I think Rhea Ripley was the right pick to win the Elimination Chamber match. And who knows, maybe at one point it was going to be Bianca Belair. And maybe, that just goes back into the stuff that John Cena was saying. Ever since John Cena has been retired, every interview that he does, people bring up, well, The Rock and Travis Scott. The Rock disappeared. Travis Scott disappeared. And he keeps reiterating that things change all the time. And I think that between all the injuries that we're seeing, I think that between the deal that was made of the pivot that happened at WrestleMania 40, I think that between all the stuff that we see now on Unreal, when we look at those whiteboards and we see how much these matches change, when we see that Finn Balor versus Dominic Mysterio was penciled in at SummerSlam, and we may get it at WrestleMania, maybe, I think that we realize how much pivoting is really happening. And that could be what we're seeing here. But regardless, this is where we're at. And I think that Rhea Ripley versus Jade Cargill is pure spectacle. I think that it is superstars. This is what WWE superstars means. When you put the two of them, they both are hopefully will have massive entrances, incredible attire, looking both like they're statues. I mean, just appearing, both of them completely larger than life, and watching this all happen. And it could be a wonderful, amazing crowning moment for Jade Cargill. But I'm hopeful that it's a return to form for Rhea Ripley. I'm hopeful that it's Rhea Ripley back to singles action, back on top. Because Rhea Ripley, and I really, really thought that Rhea Ripley was going to win the Elimination Chamber after she and Io Sky surprisingly lost the Tag Team Championship on SmackDown to Lash Legend and Nia Jax. And I think that with that Tag Team Championship, now I'm at the point where I think a multi-team tag match at WrestleMania is the way to go. Maybe even a six-pack challenge. I think putting the Tag Team Championship on the line with the Irresistible Forces, which I wish was just Irresistible Force, but whatever. The Irresistible Forces defending against like Kabuki Warriors, Bellas, Charlotte, and Alexa. You could throw in Bayley and Lyra if you want to. Like, the women's division has been built out strong. So I think that that's where I see it all going. But that's all. The only thing that I don't know, right? Because I'm very much looking forward to this match, and I want Rhea Ripley to win. I want her to return to form. I want her to retake her throne. I want her to show up once again as WWE Women's Champion. And I think that having Lash Legend pin Rhea Ripley on SmackDown, Rhea being the one to get pinned by Lash Legend specifically to have that title switch happen, I think is going to open a door for Rhea Ripley to win the WWE Women's Championship and then have a built-in opponent, which is Lash Legend. That's something that I would like to see. At the same time, I don't exactly know where Io Sky would fit into WrestleMania now that Rhea and Io are no longer a tag team. I don't know if there's a singles match. I don't know if Io also comes over to SmackDown and competes for the United States Championship. I mean, listen, AJ Lee versus Io Sky would be incredible, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get a rematch. You know, with all the chicanery involving the exposed turnbuckle, I'm pretty sure we're going to get some kind of rematch between AJ Lee and Becky Lynch at WrestleMania, and I think that we should. But yeah, I don't know exactly where that leaves Io Sky. I think eventually, I would love to see Rhea versus Io at SummerSlam. I would love to see Rhea win that title. And I would love to see her hold it until SummerSlam, where she has her match with Io Sky. And then it becomes, can Io get the title back, or can Rhea beat Io Sky for the first time in her entire career? That to me is a compelling 2-night stadium show match, which you can do at SummerSlam if Rhea Ripley is your champion. But I don't know where that leaves Io for WrestleMania. I guess we shall see. We shall see. I think Roman Reigns versus CM Punk is going to be something special. It's going to make us uncomfortable. It's gonna make us want to hold on. Roman Reigns tweeting out after CM Punk retained the championship against Finn Balor, who very much, as I thought should and probably would happen, Finn Balor, like a complete babyface, doesn't get any help, goes out on his sword, loses a hard-fought match, and it's all good. I think that was very intentional, and I think that Finn Balor is a babyface going into WrestleMania. But CM Punk, now that he officially is carrying that World Heavyweight Championship into WrestleMania, and Roman Reigns is going to be on Raw tonight, Roman Reigns tweeted out that he didn't know who was more tired, the crowd or the champion, after CM Punk's match with Finn Balor. And that he said to CM Punk, enjoy the next however many weeks of relevancy, which was too real. It's too real. Saying you're not entertaining and you're blown up. I mean, this is real stuff. This is real life now. And CM Punk going on the post show and saying you got time to tweet, but you don't have time to go to Chicago. I mean, this is going to get real. And I think that Roman Reigns has probably been building ammunition for a very long time. And I think that CM Punk is going to have to go into territory that he hasn't been in a very long time, because there is no reverence for CM Punk. You know, CM Punk versus Roman Reigns is a big match. But Roman Reigns, I don't think benefits by having CM Punk there. You know what I mean? Just like, I think that it's just, they're very unique in the sense that they are both massive stars, but are massive stars completely independent of each other. Both of them have the ability to have a huge WrestleMania main event at this point in their career, and it doesn't have to be against each other. So neither one of them has any sort of reverence for the fact that, like, oh, this is a big match, and I get to have the Punk match, or I get to have the Roman match. That's not how either one of them are feeling in a very real way. I think this is going to be very interesting. I think Roman is going to be on Raw for 5 of the 7 weeks leading to WrestleMania. And I think that it starts on Monday, just today. I think it's going to be interesting to watch this carry over for 5 weeks. Or 5 shows over the course of 7 weeks. Because I think it's going to get very real. And I think that Punk, in those 2 weeks that Roman's not there, needs to take full advantage of the fact that Roman's not there. Needs to go full John Cena talking to The Rock live via satellite. You know what I'm saying? Like really, really, really punch home the idea that Roman Reigns isn't there. Because Roman Reigns, the gloves are going to be off when Roman Reigns shows off on Monday Night Raw. And I cannot wait. I feel like we're going to get to WrestleMania 42. And there is going to be this feeling of such real life tension between Roman Reigns and CM Punk. And look, I don't know what it says about me, but that's my favorite type of wrestling. When I feel that real life tension. I would love to know how you felt. Email in notsamwrestling@gmail.com. That's my email address. notsamwrestling@gmail.com. Tons. All this email. So much email coming in since last night. I mean, or since Saturday night. All of it coming in post-Elimination Chamber, which I love. And it really does tell you that say what you want. There's a lot of people talking about WrestleMania coming out of Elimination Chamber. Clyde writes in, hope all is well. Can we speculate wildly that during Punk's iconic Chicago entrance on Saturday in the background that led up to the entrance, that could have been Paul Heyman plotting his... No. That could have been Paul Heyman plotting his next strategic move. Could we see a reunion of Punk and Heyman? If so, no. I've seen this stuff online that people were like, oh, there was a shadow behind Punk when he came out. There was this, no, I think that was just a guy probably holding a light. This is like when they building up to WrestleMania 40. Everybody was paying attention to what wrestlers were on what, satellite trucks. And I was like, guys, they're just the trucks. I understand everything counts and it's fine that you ask about it, but no, there was no part of me that was watching CM Punk's Chicago Bulls entrance. And I was like, yeah, but there's Easter eggs there. I do not think that they were Easter eggs. I think it was just a shadow. You know what I mean? I think that stuff, it's live TV. Stuff just happens sometimes. But no, I do not think that Paul Heyman was getting it. Paul Heyman has got enough between Seth Rollins and the Vision and Brock Lesnar that no, I do not think that he's getting it all involved with CM Punk. No. I don't think that was, I think it was nothing. Justin writes in, greetings, my OPTC, Fatu, he says, well, I will give you one of these. Fatu! And very happy to get one of these from Cody on SmackDown. Enough! Was it just me, or did it sound like audio was cut or altered to silence the boos of Raquel being eliminated? I don't know. I mean, I heard the boos, and I wasn't surprised by it. Raquel's got incredible momentum, so I don't think that they would have done that. I don't think that they want to silence the fact that people love Raquel, so I don't, Also, do we see this Gunther Dragon Lee feud culminating in a Rey Mysterio versus Gunther match at WrestleMania, leading to him retiring Rey? It doesn't make sense for Gunther to feud with Lee, considering his whole mission is to get rid of the old guard taking up spots. Somehow Rey gets involved. Yeah, I mean, that's how I see it. Unless he's going to retire Dragon Lee, which I feel like Dragon Lee's got still a lot left in the tank. I feel like at some point Rey Mysterio is going to get involved. Yeah, that's how I've kind of seen it going. Doug writes in. Oh, this is a follow-up to an earlier email. Okay, this is Doug. For a few weeks now, the night one main event of my druthers would be a 50-minute Iron Survivor challenge between McIntyre, Rhodes, Fatu, Orton, and Zayn. The prototype is there and usually satisfies. I came to the notion Fatu's assailant could possibly have been Zayn when fantasy booking before the Royal Rumble. Yeah, I remember that. Let's see. I'd really love to see these 5 star-crossed competitors in a scintillating main event. I don't know if they would take the Iron Survivor Challenge and bring it to WrestleMania. I'm not quite sure that would work. I also don't know that they want to do a 50-minute match to close night one of WrestleMania. It starts to feel like you're getting more into that territory of kind of the old days of WrestleMania. You're talking about 5 entrances. Drew McIntyre, Cody Rhodes, Jacob Fatu, Randy Orton, and Sami Zayn. Those 5 entrances alone are going to take 25 minutes. So you're talking about an hour and a half to do this main event. And it's night one. I see it being a fatal 4-way more than I see it being a 5-way deal. Let's go to Brenton, who writes in, just finished watching your Feelings podcast following the Elimination Chamber, and I'm going to have to disagree with you. I like this on one thing. I liked everything you said building up to WrestleMania with the exception of Cody retaining over Randy. I know everyone you included at times are clamoring for a Cody heel turn, but I really think we all should have learned our lesson from Cena turning heel. To me, Randy getting number 15 and getting even closer to matching or passing Cena at 17 is a far better storyline going forward. I just don't think we need another Cody title run right now. Cody beating Drew with interference from Jacob can give us weeks of Randy-Cody confrontation promos. Here's the thing. If you want Cody to be the champion going into WrestleMania, you already have a Cody title run. And the idea of putting the title back on Cody for 6 weeks, and then he loses it again. I think that if Cody is going to turn, everything that you just said justifies Cody turning. I want to see Randy get to 15. I don't want to see Cody have another run. I want to see this. I don't want to see that. Well, guess what? That all leads to this. And then you can tell this story of Cody being a villain, and maybe it takes Randy until SummerSlam to get that title from Cody Rhodes. That's not to say it can't happen. So, that's kind of, I feel like everything that you said would justify everything that I said. Let's see. Andrew writes in, we all know that not only does WWE love putting two single stars together to make a tag team, they also love putting their names together. I have attempted to get ahead of the game with Danhausen and put some potential partners. Let me know what you think. Rusevhausen, Yeethausen, Garganohausen, Ivarhausen, Omoshausen. I love them all. Joe writes in, I'd like to get your opinion. I talked with friends about the possibility of a Randy Drew Cody triple threat match. I can see interference ending the Drew Cody SmackDown match, leading to Cody pleading his case. Your Jacob Drew idea is great too. What do you think? Is a triple threat better than Jacob Drew? I think we're in for a great Mania either way. Well, I think they're both good ideas. I think you could do Randy Drew Cody in a triple threat and then do Sami Zayn versus Jacob. I think you could do that. I think, but I don't, if there's interference, I kind of feel like the only way you get to the way you would get to a triple threat, I feel like, is if Drew takes a powder and loses the match via countout. I think if there's interference and having that person interfering not involved would be odd. And I think, unless you find some way out of it, and I think that Randy wouldn't interfere because he's already got the match. So I kind of feel like if you want the triple threat, you have to have Drew get himself counted out. Then you can go to a triple threat, and then maybe Sammy tells Jacob that he's the one who knocked his teeth out of his mouth, and that way there's a reason that Jacob is not invested in the title right now, and maybe Jacob's going to go beat Sammy and then come for the WWE Championship. That's a way to do it. I don't think it would be bad at all. Let's see. Lewis writes in, greetings, Sam from Wales. Appreciate that, Lewis. Do you think that this is the SmackDown that Sami Zayn finally snaps? Cody was screwed out of the chamber and was instantly given a title match, whereas Sammy got screwed in his qualifying match and wasn't even given his chance to get back into the chamber. It plays on the Golden Boy narrative brought up a few weeks ago and would be a justified way to give Sammy a well-needed, in my opinion, heel turn. Well, I definitely think Sammy should turn. I think that logic is not right because Cody was screwed multiple times. However, the fact that logic is not right is what would make Sammy a heel. It's possible. It's not impossible. I think it is possible, but you could do a 5-way with Sammy involved. I just feel like you've got individual matches with all that stuff, but that's not to say this won't be the SmackDown that Sami Zayn snaps. I think that it is definitely possible. Kyle writes in, I loved Randy winning last night. I just listened to your emergency podcast. How would another Cody babyface versus babyface with mutual respect heading into Mania be any different than his other rivalries that were exactly the same? A Randy versus Drew build would be great, and Randy winning 15 against a heel would be better. I just don't see how Cody could do better. What are your thoughts? Well, I don't think I ever said it would be a babyface versus babyface with mutual respect. I think I said that you would create a massive moment by having one of them turn in the end. I think that you would build tension between the two of them. I don't think you would do I don't know where you're getting. I never said babyface versus babyface with mutual respect. I think it would be completely different from his other rivalries. And I think that the fact is that since WrestleMania 4, for 2 years, people have wanted Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes. We didn't get it. The whole time Cody was champion, Randy was staring at the title, and people were chomping at the bit for this match. So to pretend this isn't a match that we haven't been waiting for is totally dishonest. And then to say that I said it was going to be babyface versus babyface with mutual respect is also I don't know what show you were listening to. Well, that's not what I said. And I definitely hope that I made myself more clear on this one. And look, Randy versus Drew, but if you do Randy versus Drew, you've been building up Cody and Drew. Like the tension between Cody and Drew, you're just going to throw that out the window. The tension between Jacob and Drew, you're just going to throw that out the window. If Cody loses the championship match to Drew McIntyre on Friday, I doubt he's going to lose clean. So how do you justify, if you're doing this match on SmackDown, how do you justify Cody losing in a way that is not clean? And then he's just fine with it and we move on to something else. There's no way on SmackDown this puts a bow on things. So that's kind of, I feel like a lot of this stuff ignores stories that are happening. There's a Jacob Drew story that is happening. There's a Cody Drew story that is happening. And now Randy is heading in to WrestleMania. So you have to pitch me something that takes care of all of those things. Not just say, I want to see Randy versus Drew. That's great. What about all the other stories that are currently being told on television? That's why Watch the Product is such an important rule. Okay. Raj from Queens writes in, just listen to the emergency pod. I love that, by the way. And I love these discussions, by the way. I hope you never take from my tone that I don't like the email or that I think you're sending a bad idea. It's just how I talk. It drives my wife insane. Raj writes in, I just listened to the emergency pod and you were talking about Jacob costing Drew the belt at SmackDown. What if Sammy interferes and costs Cody the championship, leading to Sammy versus Cody? Drew interfered in the qualifying match for the Chamber. Sammy, yeah. This could be the reason Sammy interferes. He's tired of Cody being handed opportunities. Yep. You were also saying Cody should turn heel at Mania. Cody can still turn heel at Mania versus Sammy. Well, I don't think that would happen. Orton can beat Drew to win the championship. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Sammy interfering in the match would be Sammy turning heel. So if you got Cody versus Sammy and Sammy's a heel, I don't know why Cody would also turn heel. It doesn't really make any sense. By the way, you and Megan need to do a SmackDown recap pod. Love the dynamic you two have. I really appreciate that, Raj. My only problem is that doesn't tell me what you're going to do with Jacob. Jacob has a problem with Drew. So where is Jacob left? If you've got Cody and Sammy and you've got Drew and Randy, what's Jacob doing? You got all those elements need to be taken care of. And I think if any of those five aren't taken care of, I would say it's Sami Zayn who's not taken care of, because it would only add to this story of Sami Zayn not getting the opportunities that he thinks that he deserves. Avik writes in, what's the haps from London? Is it just me, or are we heading to a four-way at Mania? Drew, Cody, Randy, Fatu. If so, would you have this as an elimination match or one fall to a finish? One fall to a finish. I mean, there's not really, it's not WWE's style to do it elimination style. And I don't know why, if you just do it one fall, then all four of them are still kind of in that main event scene. If, let's say, Randy wins 15 by pinning Drew, Cody still wants that title. Jacob still has a problem with Drew. Jacob may want the title as well. There's still many different things that you can do that way. Let's see. Mark writes in, and he starts with this. Watch your emergency podcast, post-elimination chamber. I agree with you about Drew, Cody, Randy, and Jacob. The only thing I would suggest is that Drew and Jacob be a number one contenders match with the winner getting a shot at the PLE after WrestleMania. I would say I wouldn't put that stipulation on it. I think that it would diminish the match to put that stipulation on it. I think it would still happen. Whoever wins that match does get the title shot. But I don't think I think that Drew versus Jacob, there is already a personal rivalry between the two of them. So just do Drew versus Jacob. And one of them wins clean and goes forward to say, well, I've earned a title match. And everybody agrees. And then you go to Backlash in Tampa with Drew or Jacob versus Randy or Cody. But I don't think it's a number one contenders match, because having a WrestleMania match that is a number one contenders match feels like it dramatically diminishes the match. I have two questions for you. Is it time for the Lucha Brothers to reunite on Raw and challenge the Usos for the Tag Team Championship? I think it would be great, but I think Penta is doing really great as a single star. So is it time for that? No, I don't sit there and go, it's time. You got to do it. But if it happened, I think it'd be great. I'd be totally fine with it. But I also think Penta is doing great as a single star. So, Tama Tonga looks like he and Solo might be parting company soon, with Tama being real brothers with Tonga Loa and Tala Tonga, and having known JC Mateo for a while in Japan. Does Tama walk away from Solo and the MFTs, or will Tama and the MFTs kick out Solo, losing as consequences? Right? It's a good question. I don't know that I see the MFTs breaking up right now. I wish that the MFTs were having a little bit more success. I'd like to actually, as much as I love, the Wyatts and I love all the spooky stuff, I would like the MFTs to kind of make short work of the Wyatts. I'd like the MFTs to be elevated. I like watching the push that Tama Tonga's getting, but no, I don't think that Solo would survive being kicked out of the MFTs. And so, no, I also don't know what that group is without Solo. Like, who's talking for that group if Solo's not there? So, I don't see them breaking up. And if anything, I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening right now anyway. Maybe in the future. Let's go to, this will be the last one, okay? Again, these were all sent after Elimination Chamber, which is wild. Sam, I acknowledge you, of course. Well, of course. Thank you very much, Lenny. On your emergency podcast after Elimination Chamber, you tossed out the theory of Drew versus Jacob if he loses the title to Cody. But I think there's another option. If Drew loses, what if this is how we get Aldis back in the ring, and it's Drew McIntyre versus Nick Aldis? I've heard that theory bandied about, and I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't think Drew McIntyre versus Nick Aldis is a bad idea. It doesn't work for me as a WrestleMania match. I don't think that you can realistically tell me that a guy who finally won the WWE Championship back, who was on a path to go to WrestleMania as the defending WWE Champion, is now at WrestleMania fighting the general manager. I don't think that you can tell me that those things are even remotely equivalent. I don't think it, I think there are plenty of places. I would love to see Nick Aldis versus Drew McIntyre. I think that it's something you could do at a secondary PLE down the road. I think that it's something you could do on an episode of SmackDown. I think it puts Drew in a weird spot. I mean, especially at WrestleMania, I don't think Drew benefits greatly from beating Nick Aldis, nor does SmackDown, because I like Nick Aldis as GM. And I don't know how Drew McIntyre comes back if he loses to Nick Aldis. So no, for me, Nick Aldis versus Drew McIntyre is not a WrestleMania match. Just because I just don't think in the current story it would service Drew McIntyre whatsoever, win or lose. But I would love to see that match happen at a TV or maybe at another pay-per-view or maybe down the road somewhere where we're not, darting from Drew as the champion to Drew's fighting the general manager. I appreciate the emails. As always, notsamwrestling@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed. I would imagine we're going to get some stuff on Raw, and we're going to have a lot to say about it, and I will say it right here. Subscribe across all audio platforms, wherever you get podcasts. Get Not Sam Wrestling. On YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hitting like, leaving comments, and we will talk again very soon here on Not Sam Wrestling.